My chest burned every time I tried to breathe. The hospital light above me hummed like it was mocking me, pale and merciless. I could feel the swelling under my ribs, every inhale like a blade cutting through skin that wasn't ready to heal. Dad's fists had landed harder than he realized, or maybe exactly how he meant. And Mom, her voice sharp as glass, whispered the line that split me deeper than his punch ever could. Stay quiet, he has a future. I was 23, not a kid anymore. My future apparently didn't matter. My cracked ribs, my bruised skin, my silence, that was my assigned role. His reputation, his job, his name on the church bulletin board, those were the things that counted. When the doctor pressed the stethoscope to my chest, I winced so hard my eyes blurred. She didn't flinch. She didn't look away. She saw the purple blotches crawling up my side, the way I held my body like it might collapse. And then she said the words no one in my family ever said to me, "You're safe now." Her hand went for the phone. Calm, steady. Like she'd done this before. Like she knew exactly who she was calling and what came next. I just lay there, shirt crumpled on the chair, wondering if I should stop her, if I should play the same role I'd been playing since I was old enough to know better. Cover it up, act tough, pretend Dad was just strict. That's what Mom wanted. That's what everyone at home needed to keep the story straight. But something shifted in me in that moment. Watching her fingers move across the keypad, watching her eyes hold mine as if daring me to object. It was like someone had finally chosen me over him. For the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. I didn't say a word. I let her dial. I let the silence grow heavier than my pain. And as the room filled with the soft ringing on the other end of that line, one thought pulsed through me like the ache in my ribs. If the truth finally came out, what would it cost us all? Have you ever wondered what happens when the person protecting you refuses to look away? The call wasn't long. I heard her state my name, my age, my injuries, her voice firm like she'd done this dance before. She didn't sugarcoat anything. She said fractured ribs and domestic assault, like they were just medical facts, not the wreckage of my home. Then she hung up, slipped the phone back into her coat pocket and stood there, still watching me. "Do you want them here?" she asked quietly. I didn't answer. My throat tightened, words stuck somewhere between loyalty and survival. Want them here? No. Did I need them here? That was a different story. By the time the uniformed officers walked through the ER doors, my body went cold. Mom showed up an hour later, face pale, hands wringing at tissue that was already shredded. She leaned over me like this was just some accident. "Tell them you fell. Please," she whispered. Her eyes darted toward the hallway where the cops stood, writing notes. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. Because that's what I'd always done, shielded him, carried the lie. You slipped, you tripped, you're clumsy. Little stories patched together so Dad could keep his clean face in town. But when I opened my mouth, nothing came. The truth was pressing too hard against my chest, heavier than the broken bones themselves. The officers didn't push. They just asked simple questions. Date of birth. Where do you live? Did this happen at home? And when they asked if my father was responsible, the air in the room felt like it stopped moving. I stared at the ceiling. My lips were dry, cracked from holding too much in. Mom's hand gripped my wrist like she could squeeze the words back inside me. Yes, I whispered. The sound was so small but it felt like an earthquake. Mom's grip loosened. The officers exchanged a glance. One of them scribbled faster. That night Dad didn't come home. Mom didn't look at me when she finally left the hospital. And I lay there in that bed, wrapped in bandages, staring at the ceiling tiles and wondering if I had just burned my entire life down with a single word. The thing about truth is, it doesn't stop at one confession. It keeps rolling. And I didn't know what else it was about to uncover. The next morning, the nurse wheeled in a tray of bland eggs and toast. I barely touched it. My ribs ached too much to chew, too much to even think about food. I just kept staring at the door, half expecting Dad to walk in, face red, voice sharp, telling me I'd ruined everything. But it wasn't him. It was my aunt, Mom's younger sister. I hadn't seen her in months. She came in with a paper bag from the diner, the smell of black coffee and hash browns filling the room. She set it down on the counter, sat and said nothing for a long minute. Finally, she whispered, "They told me what happened." Her voice cracked. I should have spoken up years ago. I blinked. Years ago? She avoided my stare, fussing with the napkin in her lap. Then she said it, words that made my stomach twist harder than the broken bones did. "It wasn't just you." I leaned forward, ribs screaming, but I needed to hear it. "What do you mean?" She sighed. "Your dad? He wasn't always gentle with us growing up. Me, your mom. But your mom made peace with it by protecting him. She thought keeping quiet was the way to survive. And she dragged you into that silence. I sat back, the weight of it pressing down. My whole life I thought Mom's whisper to stay quiet was about me being weak, about me not being tough enough. But it was her training me in the same twisted loyalty she'd lived under. Later that day the doctor returned with the chart. "You'll need 6 to 8 weeks recovery," she said. "Work will be tough. Heavy lifting's out of the question." I worked at a warehouse. My paycheck depended on lifting. She saw the panic cross my face. "We'll write you notes. Disability leave. You'll be okay." Okay. That word didn't mean what it used to. Okay meant bills piling up. Okay meant Dad raging at the loss of control. Okay meant Mom torn between blood and reputation. That night, lying in the hospital bed, I thought about the warehouse, the rent due in 2 weeks, the car insurance. Every dollar suddenly looked like a trap. But more than that, I thought about silence. How many people had been crushed under it? How much I'd lost because of it? And for the first time in my life, I wondered, what if breaking the silence was the only way to finally live? When they finally discharged me, I walked out with a paper bag full of prescriptions and a chest wrapped tight in bandages. The air outside the hospital felt different, thinner, sharper. Like I'd stepped into a world where nothing was hidden anymore. Mom was waiting by the curb in her old sedan. She didn't say a word as I lowered myself into the passenger seat. The silence between us was thicker than the seatbelt across my chest. Halfway home she finally spoke. "You didn't have to say it." Her knuckles tightened on the wheel. "You could have kept it between us." I stared out the window at the strip malls, the car lots, the neon diner sign flickering in daylight. Between us? It was never between us. It was on me. Always on me. She swallowed hard. "You don't understand, he could lose everything. His job, the house." I cut her off. And I almost lost my ribs. My breath. My life. She flinched at that. For a moment I thought she might apologize. But instead she pressed harder on the gas. When we got home, Dad's truck wasn't in the driveway. The house looked normal, like nothing had happened. But the air inside was heavy, every picture frame and cross on the wall carrying a weight I couldn't ignore anymore. I went straight to my room, shut the door and locked it. The lock never mattered before. Dad had ways of making walls meaningless. But that night it felt different. Because now other people knew. Now the silence wasn't airtight anymore. My phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. When I answered, it was a detective. Calm voice. Steady. He asked if I'd be willing to give a statement. I said yes before I could stop myself. That night, lying in my own bed, I could hear Mom crying down the hall. But I didn't move. I didn't comfort her. For once, I let her sit in the silence she'd forced on me for years. I stared at the ceiling, breathing through the ache in my ribs, and thought, this was just the start. The truth wasn't done yet. The detective's office smelled like old coffee and dust. A tape recorder sat between us, its red light blinking steady. My ribs ached as I leaned forward in the chair, but I spoke anyway. Every word felt like ripping open a scar. I told him about the fists, the shouting, the nights I'd slept in my car just to avoid being under the same roof. I told him about Mom, how she patched up the lies as fast as she patched up the bruises. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I just laid it out like I was tired of carrying it. When I finished, he clicked the recorder off and sat back. "You understand," he said, "this could move forward? Charges, hearings. It won't stay in this room." I nodded. My stomach turned, but I nodded anyway. Walking out of that building, the sun felt too bright. My aunt was waiting by the curb this time. She didn't hug me, she just put her hand on my shoulder, gentle but firm. "Proud of you," she said. 3 words I hadn't heard in years. But pride didn't pay bills. A week later, the warehouse manager called. "We can't hold your position that long," he said flatly. "We'll put you back on the list when you're cleared." Translation: I was out of a job. At home, the tension thickened. Mom barely spoke to me. When she did, it was short, clipped. "Dinner's ready. Doctor called. Don't answer the phone." She still believed silence could patch it all together. But silence couldn't stop the letters that started arriving in the mail. Legal documents, notices, dates circled in red. Dad's name. My name. Words like arraignment and testimony. One night, I found Mom sitting at the kitchen table, head in her hands, papers spread out. "You don't know what you've started," she whispered. I wanted to say I knew exactly what I'd started. But the truth? I didn't. All I knew was that the walls of our house felt thinner, like the secrets inside were about to leak into the whole town. And maybe that was the point. What's worse, losing your family's love or realizing it was never love at all? Court wasn't like the movies. No shouting matches, no dramatic confessions. Just wooden benches, a judge with tired eyes, and the sound of papers shuffling. I sat there stiff in a borrowed button-down, my ribs still aching under the fabric. Dad was across the room in a suit, hair slicked back, jaw tight. He looked like the same man who shook hands after church on Sundays, not the one who'd left me gasping for air on the living room floor. When they called my name, I stood. My voice cracked once, but I told the truth. Plain steady. No embellishments. No excuses. Just the truth. Dad didn't look at me. Not once. Afterward, outside on the courthouse steps, my aunt pressed a folded 20 into my hand. For lunch, she said, even though we both knew it wasn't much. It was more than money, it was her saying she saw me, that she wouldn't let me walk this alone. Meanwhile, Mom stayed by Dad's side. She didn't come near me. Didn't ask how I was holding up. She clung to him like he was the one who needed saving. That was the day I realized my family had split down the middle. And I wasn't the one holding the knife, it was the truth itself. Back home the town buzzed. Small towns always do when something cracks the surface. People I'd known for years looked at me different. Some with pity, others with quiet nods of respect. But the whispers, those cut sharpest. I caught them at the gas station, the diner, even the grocery store. That's the kid who testified against his dad. I'd always wanted to be seen. Now I was. And it was nothing like I imagined. Bills piled up on my desk. With the warehouse job gone, disability checks barely stretched far enough. I skipped meals, let the car insurance lapse, wore the same clothes until the fabric thinned. But even through the struggle there was a strange lightness. Like I'd finally stopped carrying someone else's weight. One night, lying awake, I thought about Silence again. How it had protected him, broken me, and poisoned Mom. And I realized, silence was never neutral. It always served someone. For the first time, I wondered if speaking up might not just free me, but others too. Because if he could hurt me this way, how many others had learned to swallow their pain in the same house? The day of Dad's sentencing, the courthouse was colder than the January air outside. My breath fogged in the hallway as I waited to be called in. Every step echoed against the tile, and I felt the weight of every eye on me, neighbors, old teachers, people who'd watched me grow up. They weren't looking at me like a son anymore. I was the witness, the one who broke the silence. Inside, the judge read out the charges, voice flat, deliberate. Words like assault, domestic, and bodily harm filled the room, but I couldn't look up. My gaze stayed fixed on my shoes, scuffed from months of wear. When it was my turn to speak, my palms sweated through the paper I'd written on. I didn't make it long, just a few sentences about pain, about nights I couldn't breathe, about the way silence had almost buried me. My voice wavered, but I didn't stop. Dad still didn't look at me. Not once. The sentence wasn't long. It never is in cases like these. But it was enough to shift the ground under our family. Enough to show the world the cracks we'd been hiding. Afterward, outside the courthouse, Mom brushed past me like I was a stranger. She clung to Dad as deputies led him away, her face pale but loyal. I stood on the steps, papers in hand, realizing that whatever bond one thought tied us together had been cut clean through. That night, back in my empty room, I stared at the stack of bills on my desk. Rent overdue, utilities threatening shutoff. No job, no steady check, no family support. My ribs still throbbed when I twisted too fast, but the ache in my chest was heavier. I picked up the phone and called the only person who'd shown up for me without hesitation. My aunt. She answered on the first ring. "Come over," she said before I even asked. "I've got a couch. And a hot meal." At her house, I slept deeper than I had in months. Safe. No footsteps outside my door. No whispers telling me to stay quiet. Just the steady hum of her refrigerator and the comfort of knowing I wasn't alone anymore. Days turned into weeks. I started small jobs, stocking shelves at the grocery store, fixing fences for a neighbor who paid in cash. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Every dollar felt earned, honest, untainted by fear. The whispers in town didn't stop, but some of them changed. A woman at the diner pulled me aside, her hand trembling. "You were brave," she said softly. "My son went through the same." We never spoke up. Her words clung to me longer than the whispers of judgment. They reminded me that my voice carried further than I thought. And as I walked back to my aunt's that evening, a bag of groceries in my arms, I realized something simple but steady. When you stop protecting the ones who hurt you, you start protecting everyone else they could touch. Spring came slow that year. The trees outside my aunt's porch turned green one leaf at a time, as if the world itself was testing me, asking if I had the patience to rebuild. My ribs healed, but the deeper wounds, the kind you can't see on an X-ray, took longer. Some nights I still woke up sweating, convinced I heard his boots in the hallway. But then I'd open my eyes and remember, I was free of that house. Work picked up. A friend from high school got me a spot at a construction site. The pay wasn't much, but it was steady, and the rhythm of hammering nails and hauling lumber grounded me. Honest work. My own work. Every paycheck meant another bill paid, another step away from the life I left behind. At the grocery store one Saturday, I saw Mom in the cereal aisle. Her hair looked thinner, her shoulders slumped like she was carrying more than she could hold. She froze when she saw me, her hand hovering over a box of cornflakes. For a second I thought she might cry. But then she turned her cart and walked the other way. No words. Just distance. I stood there, heart pounding, realizing she'd made her choice. She wasn't coming with me on this road. She'd tied herself to Dad, even as his name was dragged through courtrooms and small-town gossip. That was her survival. Mine was different. One evening after work, I sat with my aunt on the porch. The sun dipped low, painting the sky orange. She handed me a glass of iced tea and said, "You know, you did more than speak for yourself. You gave other people permission." I didn't answer right away. But I thought about the woman at the diner, the quiet nods from neighbors who never spoke before, the way silence had cracked open just enough for others to breathe. Maybe my ribs breaking was the price for something bigger, something that went beyond me. Months passed and the courthouse letters stopped. Dad faded into the background of the town, a man marked by his own actions. Mom stayed beside him, still guarding his shadow. But I no longer carried their silence. It wasn't mine to bear anymore. I saved every extra dollar I could. Bought a used truck, rusty but dependable. Signed a lease on a small one-bedroom apartment. For the first time, the keys in my pocket opened a door that was mine alone. No whispers. No fear. Just space to breathe. On my first night in that apartment, I sat on the floor with a cheap folding chair and a box of takeout. The window was open, letting in the cool night air. I felt the ache in my chest, not from broken ribs anymore but from something gentler. Relief. And I realized the quiet around me wasn't empty. It wasn't the silence of secrets or shame. It was peace.